What a showing from the Volunteers, 76-63, a much-needed win over the arch rival Kentucky, especially after getting embarrassed in Lexington just 3 weeks ago. 4 players scoring double figures, a total team win. Logan Ward jumps on here today. We're going to discuss all of that and more here on a Wednesday Locked On Vols.
You are Locked On Vols, your daily podcast on the Tennessee Volunteers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, everybody, and welcome into a Wednesday edition of Locked On Vols. I am your host, Eric Cain, and we've got a fun show ahead. Hey, how about that? 76-63, Tennessee wins over Kentucky in a game that was very critical because of this 6-game stretch we've been talking about, especially this week of basketball at home against Kentucky and then on the road against Arkansas. Tennessee ensures at least a 1-1 split, and arguably the better of the two teams, arguably the best team in the country. Tennessee makes quick work at Kentucky. Again, the score got up to about 20 at one point in time, but Tennessee finishes it off 76-63. I'm your host, Eric Cain. So glad to have you guys along for the ride. Thanks so much for making Locked On Vols your first listen each and every day, and for subscribing on YouTube and watching on YouTube. Really appreciate that as well. All right, so I do radio at 99.1thesportsanimal.com. Also, not just .com, but on the FM and AM dials. Also, I'm a writer for VolQuest.com covering Tennessee athletics. But one of my buddies over at the Sports Animal, his name is Logan Ward, and he's going to come on and do this little post-game show with us like he did last week as well. Logan, what's going on, man? Hey, real quick, immediate thoughts. A big win for Tennessee.
I mean, you said it right there. I think Kentucky is the best team in the country. From what they've done ever since, I guess, the loss to Auburn, TyTy Washington wasn't 100% healthy or not. That was very, very evident and clear as soon as that game tipped off. You controlled Oscar Tshiebwe. He didn't have that much of an impact as I'm afraid that he was going to have against kind of a weaker, inexperienced, hasn't shown us a whole lot. Tennessee, down low big man. But, I mean, huge win for Tennessee. And, hey, another 9 o'clock tip. I tell you what, those are so much fun.
It is 11:28 local time at the time of this recording here. By the time I get this thing edited, put up on the Apple Podcast, Spotify, Odyssey, all that, by the time it gets on YouTube, I'll be crawling into bed at about 1:30, 1:45, and that 4:30 that's going to get snoozed to 5 a.m. alarm clock.
I about said you get up a whole lot earlier than I do by like 3 hours.
Can't wait up for that. So, but hey, I mean, at least listen. When Tennessee's good, it's good for business. Unfortunately, when Tennessee is very, very bad, it's also good for business. When Tennessee's kind of in between, business ain't so great. This is a big win for Tennessee. And now, of course, Tennessee's been inside the top 25 all season long, but a marquee win, stays undefeated at home all season long, picks up win number 8 in SEC play. Rick Barnes is now 9-7 all time against Kentucky, and the win last night, or tonight really, ensures Tennessee has won at least one game over Kentucky in each of the past 7 seasons. So, again, this win means so much. We'll go ahead and start off with the stars of this basketball game. You brought up TyTy Washington. He had that injury against Florida. Didn't think he was going to play in this game. Toughed it out, played the first half. First possession of the second half, turns it over. That's all she wrote for TyTy Washington. Kentucky surely was limited without Washington, one of the best freshman players in the country, one of the better players in the country as well. And so I'm not going to, discredit that. You mentioned Oscar Tshiebwe there in the open about how Tennessee kind of controlled him. It's funny. He finished with 9 points and 12 rebounds the first go around. This game, he finishes with 13 points and 15 rebounds. But you're right. It felt like Tennessee controlled the Stars for Kentucky and obviously got ahead on the offensive end. And really, it was just kind of a rout from about midway through the first half.
Oscar Tshiebwe, 5 of 15 shooting from the field. That's clearly not what he does night in, night out. He really misses only, 4 or 5 shots a game looking at his shooting percentages this season. As I said, I was very, very concerned about how the Tennessee big men were going to match up against him, especially down low, having to go up against that big of a body and a guy who can just dominate the floor. And Rick Barnes said it this week, you can't say player of the year without saying Oscar Tshiebwe, and certainly he had a good game as well, 13 points, 15 rebounds. But for the most part, I mean, Adu, Fulkerson, Huntley Hatfield at times, Plasvich at times really held their own against Oscar Tshiebwe, and I think that's a huge, huge part in why Tennessee was able to get this win.
Yeah, you mentioned his name there, Jonas Adu. This is a guy that was planning to redshirt until literally about a week ago, okay? When Olivier Cumwall goes down with injury, you force him into action, and he's going to be a player. We talked about this last week. He's going to be a player down the line. He held his own, not only held his own, he looked good out there tonight. 7 rebounds. That's second on the team behind Fulkerson's 8. We'll get to Fulke here in just a minute. Only 5 points, that's fine, but played 18 minutes, easily a career high. 7 rebounds, easily a career high. 2 or 3 shooting from the field. He is providing Tennessee some great
3 blocks
minutes.
as well.
Yeah, 3 blocks, some great minutes in the front court. And I just think that obviously you want to have Olivier Cumwall out there, but the way Adu is progressing right now, this is some good, valuable minutes he's getting, and it's helping Tennessee in the long run.
It's clear that I think right now that, Rick Barnes trusts Adu more than Huntley Hatfield. Huntley Hatfield might give you more on the offensive end of the ball, but whenever you look at Rick Barnes and how he constructs his roster and what he demands out of his guys, look no further than Kennedy Chandler in the point guard position. His whole entire career coaching is what you get out of the defense, and I think he trusts Adu a lot more than Huntley Hatfield. As I said, he might not give you as well Huntley Hatfield's going to, on the offensive end of the floor, just because he's so limited in what he really can do, and Huntley Hatfield has shown the ability to at least step out and attempt some, outside shots, kind of like what Cumwall did, but obviously not as good of an outside shooter as Cumwall. That's clear. But I think what he meant for this team, tonight and for the rest of the year, if you can get something like this out of him for the remainder of the season, all of a sudden, the loss of Olivier Cumwall, it's not that great. I mean, Olivier Cumwall was playing his best basketball, but I mean, I look, athletically wise, a lot of guys don't get as athletic down low as Adu. So, I mean, I think he's huge for Tennessee down the stretch.
Yeah, and he's just going to continue to get better and better and better. Real quick, we'll hit the stats, we'll hit the player lines and all that in segment 2. We got Josh Ward. It's a Ward times 2 Wednesday. We got Josh Ward coming up in segment 3. But I do want to go through a couple of just notes that I jotted down. All right, so midway through the first, Chandler was just huge. He had 15 points in the first half. Vescovi had 14 points in the first half. Chandler hit back-to-back threes, scored 8 straight points, giving Tennessee its first lead of the ball game. During that stretch, Tennessee was on a 12-1 run over 3:27 of game action, led 27-18. That lead grew to a 17-1 run up to 32-18. During that stretch, Kentucky was 0 for their last 8 from the field, no field goals, and an 8:39 time span that grew up to 10 minutes. And I forgot where I stopped counting. It was about 10:32, I believe, is when how long Kentucky went without a field goal there in that first half. Tennessee in the first half, 55% from the field, 55% from 3. And again, Chandler 15, Vescovi 14. Josiah Jordan-James had 7. Of course, he was in foul trouble all night long, ultimately ended up fouling out late in the ball game. But nonetheless, Tennessee, a great first half and positioned them good with a halftime lead of 46-32. And Tennessee able to slam the door shut in the second half. All right, he's Logan Ward. I'm Eric Cain. We'll come back and we will continue to break down Tennessee's 76-63 victory over the Kentucky Wildcats. But before we get back into it, I'll remind you guys about Built Bar. It's that time of the year. A lot of you guys maybe have given up on your New Year's resolutions. You don't have to with Built Bars, especially with the new Puffs from Built Bar. First ever protein bar that's infused with marshmallows, okay? They're fluffy, they're marshmallowy, they're not just a protein bar, they're a treat, and they're covered in 100% real chocolate. A fan favorite as well, includes flavors like yummy cinnamon, churro, coconut marshmallow, banana cream pie. So good. Brand new flavors out each and every week at Built.com. All Built Bars, not just the Puffs, covered in 100% chocolates, contain so many proteins, up to 17 grams of proteins, only 4 net carbs, 4 grams of sugar, and only 130 calories. You compare that to a lot of the candy bars, you're looking at about 240 calories plus. So stick to those New Year's resolutions, and you can do it with the Built Bars. Go to Built.com, use the promo code LOCK15, and you're going to get 15% off your order. Again, that's promo code LOCK15 for 15% off. That is at Built.com. Hey guys, want to thank you so much for making Locked On Vols your first listen each and every day, whether you listen on the Odyssey app, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify. Thanks so much for making Locked On Vols your first listen each and every day. And of course, supporting the YouTube channel. Go ahead, if you haven't already, please subscribe. Search Locked On Vols on YouTube. Watch the show there. Let's continue to grow it as we talk Tennessee, a win over Kentucky. 76-63, a monster win for the Volunteers. We welcome back Logan Ward here breaking this down for us here in the second segment now before we get to Josh Ward in segment number 3. All right. Let's look at some of these stats here. So Tennessee did a great job defensively. First time in the Rick Barnes era that Tennessee allowed 100-plus points ever, and that was the first time these two teams met. 107 for Kentucky, now 63 the second go-around, and Tennessee did a great job with some of the best players. Wheeler, 4 of 10. Brooks Jr., 1 of 6. Grady, 2 of 9. Tshiebwe, as you mentioned, Logan, 5 of 15. Mintz, 4 of 12. Tennessee really did a number on a lot of those guys, and in the process, you were getting some great offensive, fireworks from Chandler, who finished 3 of 5 from long range, 5 of 9 shooting, 17 points. Vescovi, 18 points, 6 of 12 from the field, 14 from Zeigler. A lot of those came on late. 14 from John Fulkerson, and let's go ahead and talk about John Fulkerson right there. All right, we make a big point about John Fulkerson, talking about him on the show a lot of the times, saying that I don't think that you should ever, expect him to return to the Folkmania, the second half of 2019 or whatever. This is a great game for John Fulkerson. Again, 4 of 6 from the field, 14 points, perfect from the line, 6 of 6, 8 rebounds. He had a couple steals as well. I'm not even saying get this from John Fulkerson, but if you get, anywhere from 7 to 12 and 5 to 6 rebounds, that's great. This is an awesome performance from John Fulkerson, and it was great to see on a night when Tennessee was playing arguably the best team on the schedule.
He finally looked quick again. I guess, ever since the Arizona game, I'll say the last time he was, really himself as far as, pre-COVID. He missed the Alabama game, clearly was not right from there on out. But what Tennessee continues to do with him, very similar tonight, what they did with him in the Arizona game. They put him right there at the free throw line and then just let him drive by Tshiebwe, drive by whatever big man is on, because yes, he's undersized. He's not the biggest. He's not the tallest. But I tell you what, at that size, playing bigger guys like Tshiebwe, who doesn't move, great laterally, he can go right by him. And that was very evident. Even the broadcast mentioned that earlier on in the first half. Whenever he drove by Tshiebwe back-to-back possessions, they said that's a problem for John Calipari, and John Calipari does not want Fulkerson to be matched up on Tshiebwe at the top of the key, and that's what Tennessee needs to continue to do. But I agree with you. Just get 7, get 12, maybe jump up and get 14 points, grab down 8 rebounds as he did tonight. If Tennessee can just get a little bit, I don't feel like we're asking a lot. We're not going to get 25 like he had against Arizona. You're not going to get 27 like he had several years ago in Rupp Arena. Just get 7 to 12 points a game. I think that's a perfect, point of total for John Fulkerson for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well. But of course, 14 points, 8 rebounds, a block, and a steal. I mean, that you'll take that obviously each and every day. You go into the second half. We mentioned TyTy Washington went out after that first possession. You had Tennessee turn in its largest lead at the time of 17 points with a Fulkerson made layup. And then Kentucky went on a little bit of a run. It was making 3 of its last 3, cut it to 51-39, went on a 9-0 run that spanned about 2 minutes and 57 seconds off the clock. They cut it to 51-43. During that span, Tennessee was 0 for its last 4, had a scoring drought of a little under 4 minutes. But then again, Tennessee's offense came back. Vescovi had a layup at the banger, the dagger with Zeigler's 3, and Tennessee got that lead, a largest lead up to about 20 on the night. And, for Tennessee, again, we're talking about this week. I said on the show TSL on Tuesday morning, if we're splitting hairs here, if we're picking Tennessee, what the record's going to be on the week, I said 1-1. I initially said Tennessee was going to lose, and I guess that was kind of my final pick, if you want to call it. I said I think Tennessee will lose a close one tonight. But then again, I went back and said I was playing both sides of the fence. I said I feel better about this game than I do Tennessee on the road against Arkansas. But regardless, ensuring a 1-1 record this week with Arkansas, who's playing out of its mind as well, beat up on Missouri earlier tonight too. This is a huge win for Tennessee that you'll have to play Auburn coming up later. You'll have to welcome back Arkansas as well, and then those sandwich games with Georgia and Missouri. It's not the goal to win regular season SEC titles, but it's certainly on the table right now. And again, I don't think that we should expect that, but it is on the table. Tennessee does control its own destiny following a win tonight against Kentucky.
I mean, sure, it's there, but I mean, looking at, Kentucky was clearly not, Kentucky, not the best team in the country that I think me and you both agree with, that they were playing the best basketball that they've played all season. TyTy Washington, in my opinion, outside of Tshiebwe, they're clearly their most important player. He was not 100% healthy. Not, but Eric, I'm going to go something back a minute ago in that second half, and I even texted this to you during halftime. I said, a Tennessee lull's coming. We've seen it game in and game out. It's almost got them in a couple of games recently. It almost got them in the Arizona game. We've seen this all year. There's going to be a time where Tennessee goes, sometimes 5, 6, 7 minutes where they don't have a point. Now, luckily in this game, you had a big enough lead, and Kentucky was also having those times where they went, at 1 point, 10 minutes without a point.
I was going to say, if you want to compare lulls, at least it wasn't a 10-minute plus lull.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like Kentucky went through. Tennessee's was just a little under 4 minutes. But you're right. Tennessee has one of those each and every game, but you got to hope that you have a lead and you're playing good defensively like Tennessee was tonight.
And that was the question, going into this game, you have all the momentum in the world. You just won your 8th SEC game in a row. That's incredibly, incredibly hard in what I believe and what most believe to be the best basketball conference in America. With those lulls, and we're going to see it throughout the rest of the year. Every team has it, but we've seen Tennessee tonight. They had a big enough lead against a very, very good Kentucky team. I'll say it again. I believe to be the best team in the country right now, or at least coming into this game. They had a big enough lead to be able to withstand that lull. The question is, can they continue to do that? And if they do have a lull, what do they do on the back end and the front end of that to build a lead and then recover from that? That's the main question for me going forward.
Yeah, just pop the tape into the first half tonight, and I think a lot of those questions are answered, right? A couple more things, then we'll hand it over to my conversation from earlier in the day with Josh Ward. Tennessee at one point in time was shooting over 60% from the field. You knew that wouldn't sustain, although Kentucky in the first outing shot 67% from the floor, which is just idiotic. But Tennessee finishes 44% from the field, 24-54. Kentucky 34% from the field. Tennessee shot 47% from 3, 8 of 17. We talk about not taking too many threes. That 17 to 22 is kind of where you want to be. Tennessee took 17, made over nearly 50% of them. Tennessee was 20 of 23 from the charity stripe, a team that's gotten a little bit better as the season's gone on and making its free throws. Tennessee did that here tonight as well. Points off turnovers. Tennessee scored 20 points off 14 Kentucky turnovers. I thought that was huge as Kentucky scored 32 points off 20 Tennessee turnovers the first go around. So kind of a tale of two halves or a tale of two games there. And again, one more player I want to mention before we call quits here in segment 2. Zakai Zeigler. Obviously, the legend's growing. Everybody loves him. He might go down already as one of a fan favorite, like top 5 in all of Tennessee basketball. He finished with 14 points, had 4 assists, couple of steals. He continues to be such an incredible piece for this Tennessee basketball team. But real quick, let's talk about that scuffle there early in the first half. I mean, no one's going to get punked, right? You're playing your biggest rival. That place at Thompson-Boling Arena was absolutely nuts. Okay, obviously we weren't there because we had to be, ready, standing by to record this show as soon as the game was over. But Fulkerson goes out, throws the ball off the Kentucky player, falls on the bench. Didn't look like anything happened there. He was on the ground, about to stand up. Vescovi runs over, Zeigler runs over, and I don't want to call him a coach. I'm not sure what his role is. Maybe an assistant strength coach. Whoever that guy was, looked like he wasn't getting out of the way, and Zeigler just pushed him. I mean, I put on Twitter, yeah, Zeigler definitely started that whole thing, and everybody was, coming at me. But I just think it's so funny.
You can't say that, yeah.
Whether that was the right move or not, I mean, that it ignited that arena. The FU Kentucky chants were loud and proud inside Thompson-Boling Arena. Zeigler is a guy that will not back down from anybody, and with that little scuffle that he did start, granted, the guy might not have got out of his way, and I'm sure, some things were said. I thought that was a real critical point in this ball game early on.
He's an energy guy, and that's something that we have noticed that has been very, very evident the past, 6-7 games, really this whole Tennessee, winning streak, especially on the road at Texas, and it showed against South Carolina. It showed last game, it showed on Saturday, and it showed tonight, and it's going to probably continue to, rear itself as well. But one thing, Eric, I mentioned it to you during the break, just one last thing about the game. Combined starters, the big man, Huntley, Hatfield, and Plasvich tonight, a combined 0 of 6 from the field and 0 points. On the surface, you don't want your starters to do that, but it also helps whenever you get a combined 19 from your two other big men coming off the bench and Adu blocking, 3 shots as well, and John Fulkerson having a John Fulkerson-like, performance that we are, used to seeing, and also 35 points combined for Vescovi and Chandler. You want to get some points out of your frontline big man, especially Plasvich. He didn't look healthy that game. He kind of got, I guess hitting the rib, hitting the side. It was kind of a weird thing in there, but just the emergence of Fulkerson again and the way Adu is continuing to step up, that's going to be huge for Tennessee down the stretch.
Yep. And I talked a little bit, or I will talk with Josh a little bit about that as well. It's like these guys are starting, but they're not playing starter minutes, right? I mean, usually Tennessee plays the big men each of the first minutes, a little bit, the first half of each half, and then Tennessee goes small ball. Obviously, Josiah Jordan-James was in foul trouble, who had a really good first half, by the way, was in foul trouble all night long, didn't play a whole lot of minutes when it was all said and done. So Tennessee had to play Adu a whole lot more, and he progressed, and he looked great. But it's like Huntley, Hatfield, and Plasvich, they're starters right now, and that's fine. Don't change it if it's not broke, but they're not playing starter minutes. And so I think when you do get that production, as you mentioned, from a Zeigler who comes off the bench, you transition into small ball, Adu tonight, and, moving forward. And Fulkerson, of course, who played a ton tonight, that's okay. That can overcompensate it. So, nonetheless, Tennessee wins over Kentucky. Number 16, Tennessee takes down number 4, Kentucky, at home inside TBA 76-63. Rick Barnes, again, 9-7 all-time against Kentucky. Tennessee has beaten Kentucky at least once in each of the past 7 seasons. And should be an interesting round 3 if it comes to that in the SEC tournament. Logan, appreciate you the last 2 weeks sticking up with me here and recapping this Tennessee game. I know you'd rather be asleep, but appreciate it. Give the listeners, everybody watching can see your Twitter handle, but give the listeners a chance to find your work on social and, of course, on the Eric Cain Show.
Yeah, at Logan Ward 98 on Twitter for all your your fun takes and likes and everything like that I'll throw out that way. And also 9 to noon every weekday and also Saturdays from 8 to 10 on The Sports Animal, 9 to noon on the Eric Cain Show every Monday through Friday, and then every Saturday 8 to 10 on Saturday Sports Talk.
All right, Logan, sleep tight, buddy. Appreciate you.
We'll see. We'll try.
All right, that is Logan Ward, and go ahead and give him a follow. He does a really, really nice job. And also, if you like the numbers, he's into the numbers, give him a follow. He also throws out some free picks each and every day. All right, we'll have Josh Ward coming up. And again, a reminder, it was recorded before the game, but still a lot of good stuff there for about this 6-game stretch for Tennessee basketball. So Josh Ward is coming up next. But first, it is betonline.net. Football might be over the season, but basketball, it's full steam ahead, both pro and college hoops. From the latest odds, totals, player performance props, to where the next fire coach is going to land, betonline.net, your number one spot for all your sports betting needs. BetOnline remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, news this year. And it's not just basketball either. BetOnline.net, your favorite source for hockey, for boxing, for UFC, odds right to the Olympic coverage happening in Beijing right now. Head on over to the website today or use your mobile device and find all the latest trends in the action that you love. Hey, this Kentucky-Tennessee game, it was the betonline.net line of the day heading into it. It had Tennessee -1, and of course, Tennessee covered that. So for all your latest news and picks each and every day, go check it out. It's BetOnline. BetOnline, it is where the game starts. All right, guys, one more segment here on a Wednesday show. This is Locked On Vols. We transition from one Ward to another and bring in Josh Ward. And Josh, a big week for Tennessee basketball, of course, because of timing conflicts and these, we were just talking about these late 9 o'clock Eastern time tip-offs, get you in after Tennessee plays Kentucky. It was just impossible this week. So knowing that we're doing this before the Kentucky game, a huge week for Tennessee basketball. You're hosting Kentucky, obviously, then on the road to Arkansas, and it's really kicking off with just a brutal 6-game stretch for Tennessee. What do you see from the Volunteers this week? What would be successful during this 6-game run?
Well, if Tennessee can win both games, that's incredible. If Tennessee can split, I think that's really good. Going 0-2 would be a disappointing week, but not the end of the world. And again, this conversation is before one of the games, but I just really like the way Tennessee is playing a lot of the time. Not perfect for 40 minutes. I don't think anybody expects that and shouldn't in college basketball. But I do think that Tennessee has found a lineup that is really difficult for opponents, and that is a lineup that has Kennedy Chandler on the floor with Zakai Zeigler, Santiago Vescovi, Josiah Jordan-James, and then most likely John Fulkerson as the 5. Olivier would have been a really good option there, but he's out because of the ankle injury. So I think that lineup, I don't know, it's the lineup of death that the Warriors had several years ago, but it's a really productive lineup. And what it's able to do, it's versatile because of Josiah Jordan-James' ability to defend multiple positions. And John Fulkerson is a guy that's kind of been moved aside in the conversation, but shouldn't be. He's really important, showed that this past weekend again. So there's a lot of potential for this team when the best lineup, in my opinion, that Tennessee has is on the floor.
Yeah, it kind of seems like Rick Barnes is pushing the right buttons here lately. That's not your starting 5, but that's the 5 that we see a lot of the time. Tennessee going small ball. Looks like the Volunteers are playing a lot of Uros and Jonas Adu, Brandon Huntley Hatfield in the beginning of each the first half and the second half. But as the half goes on, you go to that 4-guard lineup. Zeigler gets onto the court. If Ziegler's out, maybe a Justin Powell. But then it is Josiah and John Fulkerson. Do you think that's by design? Do you think we could see a little bit of it more intertwined, because it almost seems like you see the bigs in there the first half of each half, and then there on after it looks like it's just kind of small ball.
Yeah, I do think it depends on the matchup. That's going to be a factor. It was against Mississippi State, the first game that Tennessee played without Olivier Nkamhoua. When on Sports 180 we talked to Mike Schwartz, Tennessee's associate head coach, he said, yeah, the multiple bigs on the court against that team really mattered. So a matchup against Auburn, let's see what the matchup is there in terms of the personnel that is used. But I think overall, making sure for 40 minutes you are spreading guys out in their minutes. Uros is not playing a ton of minutes, but he's playing a lot early as a starter, obviously. And then as the game goes along, I think Tennessee kind of transitions into that smaller lineup. And I just think that's Tennessee's best fit. They can't do that for 40 minutes because you have to have Josiah be a part of that for you to be at your best. And you're not going to ask Zakai Zeigler to play 40 minutes. Really anybody. So Justin Powell's important, I think, coming off the bench, as you mentioned his name. And Victor Bailey gets an opportunity, but he's not playing a big role for Tennessee. So I think it's largely the group that I mentioned that is going to give Tennessee its best shot. It has to include Vescovi because he's so good and so important, and he has to stay out of foul trouble. That's been part of the conversation. And then Kennedy Chandler, who, as the season has gone along, I think has just played really good basketball. Not perfect, again, but difference-making basketball a lot of the time.
Yeah, and somebody else has been playing really, really good basketball of late is Zakai Zeigler. And let me preface this by saying I think that Zakai has been phenomenal to watch. He's added so much, obviously, off the bench. He's a big, important part of this team. But the question was asked in the VolQuest chat earlier this week, who's more talented, Chandler or Zakai Zeigler? And it's, to me, it's pretty black and white. It is obviously Chandler is more talented than Zakai Zeigler. I think I offended some people when I said that, but again, it's point blank. Chandler is more talented than Zakai Zeigler. That's nothing against Zakai Zeigler, but isn't that a great conversation to be having right now because Ziegler's playing so well? And obviously, like I said, he's a huge part of what this team is doing right now.
Yeah, he's a terrific story. He's a good player. He is helping Tennessee. That's why I included him in the best lineup that Tennessee has, because Zakai makes that kind of impact. But we have a draft coming up, and Kennedy Chandler will probably be a part of it and will have a good chance to be a first-round pick. Zakai would not have that chance. So we shouldn't go overboard here in the conversation. Zakai is a really good player for Tennessee, and I think he's going to be a fan favorite for several years. He already ranks very high on that, maybe all-time conversation, no joke, with what fans think about Zakai Zeigler, and he has earned that by the way that he's played. But I think Tennessee has a big three, and that is Santiago Vescovi, Kennedy Chandler, and Josiah Jordan-James. That's not necessarily a ranking, but I think that's Tennessee's big three in terms of highest upside, biggest impact. There's a reason they play the minutes that they do because of what they're able to do on the floor. The quote X factor might be Josiah because of what he does on both ends of the floor, and when he's playing at his best on offense, then Tennessee is really difficult to beat. But I think it's pretty clear who the quote big three is, and then players like Zakai will be really important, and John Fulkerson is really important. The other guys have to play their role, but I think it's become pretty apparent during this winning streak that Tennessee has put together in SEC play who the leaders on the floor are for Tennessee to be at its best.
Still plenty of basketball left to play. Again, at the time of this, people are watching it. 5 more games left in the regular season. SEC tournaments, of course. Then you got the NCAA tournaments. But looking ahead to next year, this Tennessee basketball roster, it's going to lose John Fulkerson. And of course, obviously, I'm not asking to break any news or anything here, but the conversation will then begin to say, well, who else could potentially maybe look for something else? Not necessarily transfer, but could Santiago Vescovi maybe look to go and play professional somewhere? Could Josiah Jordan-James maybe look to go to the draft? Obviously, Kennedy Chandler, John Fulkerson. When you think of the makeup of this team coming back next season, and a lot can change, do you see anybody else declaring for the NBA draft or maybe pursuing other professional opportunities, leaving this roster right now?
No, not besides what you mentioned. I think it's still really likely that Kennedy Chandler looks to go to the NBA after this season. I know that was his plan when he arrived at Tennessee, was to play a season at Tennessee and then go to the NBA. Josiah absolutely should consider doing that. I know that fans have looked at his shooting and said, well, what's wrong with Josiah? His game has so much to go along with the shooting, which has improved during SEC play. But I think Josiah has a really good chance to be in the NBA. I think teams will love his size and intelligence and ability to defend multiple positions and still make plays on offense at times. I don't think Huntley Hatfield or Adu or in that kind of situation shouldn't be right now. In a year, I think that conversation can change. And Vescovi could certainly explore that opportunity to be a pro basketball player. So there's a lot to be determined. You never know with the transfer portal. That's going to be a question mark for pretty much every team, every offseason when players have eligibility to go somewhere else. Powell's already transferred to Tennessee, so his ability to play right away elsewhere would be gone. But I think as you look forward, right now I would think about, okay, Zakai Zeigler is somebody to build around in the backcourt. Justin Powell will continue to improve. Huntley Hatfield and Adu can do that for you in the post. And I like Jahmai Mashak's potential. I like his leadership qualities. I like his understanding of what his role has been to this point, his explosiveness on the court, and he'll continue to develop. So again, not knowing if somebody might look to transfer and go somewhere else, those players that we're not talking about as much right now will have bigger roles to play next year.
Yeah, Olivier Comeau will be in that conversation
Sure,
as well.
Yeah, him coming back. I left his name out, but he would be one of the first guys I would look to help lead Tennessee's basketball team. Not knowing the status of Josiah and Vescovi, they would obviously be high on that list too. But if they were to decide to leave, then Olivier and Zakai would probably be the top two guys you'd look to say, okay, minutes plus leadership. Let's have those guys carry us. And then again, I think if his role expands, Jahmai Mashak has those characteristics too.
Last thing, Josh, let's transition over to the football field. Kind of an open-ended question. I know Tennessee swung and missed on a couple of guys in the portal. It's kept its assistant coaching staff, intact to this point. How would you evaluate Tennessee's offseason for football so far?
I think it's been quiet, which is not necessarily a bad thing. Tennessee wanted to land some help in the transfer portal that it was not able to find in the first go-around. It'll have another opportunity after the spring. But overall, I think quiet is a pretty good answer because noise has led to a lot of chaos for Tennessee during the offseason in previous years. And Tennessee fans know exactly what I'm talking about. But the return of the coaching staff, I think, is really good for Tennessee heading into 2022. Do not expect that to be an annual conversation. You don't necessarily want it to be an annual conversation. If you are building a program, then young assistants like Alex Golish, I think he's going to have big opportunities in his future as a coach. Schools are going to come calling, and eventually they will accept those calls. But right now, with where Tennessee is and looking for some continuity and something to build on, it's in a really good position. And then obviously the optimism is going to be around Hendon Hooker, that offense, Cedric Tillman, those guys coming back. I think some pretty clear leadership with those guys and Jerome Carvin and an offensive line that has 4 or 5 starters returning. So I would be really happy with not hearing too much on the off-field side of things for Tennessee, and then hope you can still find some guys that can come in as transfers after spring, because let's also make no mistake, on the defensive side, while players will have a chance to develop and play bigger roles, they need some personnel upgrades. They at least need more competition. That would be part of the conversation. Guys that can come in and either play right away or push the guys who right now expect to play.
That's Josh Ward. He is the co-host of Sports 180 on 99.1 The Sports Animal. Josh, what's coming up on the rest of the week on your show?
Yeah, a lot of Tennessee basketball this week with a huge week and just a few weeks to go, and the Vols are in a really good position for the NCAA tournament. So that, NFL and Tennessee football off seasons, we have a lot going on in the sports world.
Awesome, Josh. Thanks so much, man. We'll can't wait until next week to get you back on.
You got it. Thank you.
All right, that is Josh Ward, former host here of Locked On Vols, current host of Sports 180, again on 99.1 The Sports Animal. Ward Wednesday, every single Wednesday right here on Locked On Vols. Thanks so much for making Locked On Vols your first listen each and every day. Give Locked On Bets your second listen. Your boy Q, handicapping expert Lee Sterling. Check out Locked On Bets right after Locked On Vols. Guys, thanks so much for your continued support with the YouTube show. Continue to subscribe. Search Locked On Vols on your YouTube channel, and go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and let's get those views up there. Guys, thanks so much. We'll be back here for a Thursday show. Until then, enjoy the rest of your Wednesday, everybody.